Hey, the next part of Chapter 12 is talking about how you as an employer need to pay your employees if you have them on an hourly rate. So you would think it's pretty simple. They work so many hours, they get paid so much per hour. You simply multiply it out and there it is. The old clock-in systems that I had when I was growing up, we didn't have computers, we had an actual clock going around, and you would take a piece of paper and you would stick it in there and you would punch it, and that would put the time up there. And because it wasn't very exact, a lot of times they calculated within 15 minutes or 12 or 5 or 10, whatever the employer set it at. And so you'd have these variable amounts that people clock in at. But now these days pretty much everything's computerized, and so when you clock in it's down to the minute, maybe even the second, as to when you clock in, and then you're paid based upon that. When you clock out, that's how many hours you are getting paid, or percentages of an hour. But to keep things simple, I'm just going to assume that this person is clocking in for exactly 8 hours every time. Alright? So if you look at the color in brown here, this person has worked for 4 days, and at 8 hours they're making $15 an hour. So if we were to add these together for those 4 days, they would have 36 hours that they had worked, and we're going to multiply that by the amount, which is 15, and then we're going to pay them $540. Most employers like to keep schedules at that level, and so they will hire additional people, because if you go beyond 40 hours, which is the mandated amount that people can work, and anything below that, they're just paid their regular rate. So if you're an employer, you want to keep things below 40, 36, they're full-time, but they're not getting any overtime pay or any bonus pay or anything like that. Okay, so from an employer's perspective, this would be a pretty typical schedule. All right? Some will push it to like 4 10-hour days, and then that's your 40, and then you're done. You have 3 days off. And that doesn't result in any bonus pay. However, there are some legally mandated things about bonus pay. So if there is overtime, if the person worked 36 hours and they were asked to come in on a Friday, well, now they've worked 4 more regular hours and they've worked 4 more overtime hours. And overtime is usually paid at 1.5 whatever rate that they're at. So if I was to demonstrate that the 4 additional hours from the 36 to the 40, it's still just paid at the regular rate of 15 an hour, and that'll give us, 600 is what we would have made on our regular hours. But we've got 4 overtime hours that we as an employer need to calculate, and 1.5 rate is going to be $22.50, so that's 1.5 times 15. That then bumps it up to $22.50, and so those last 4 hours, they're actually getting paid a much different rate. I have to calculate that differently, and then I have to add that in. All right? So it's not just 4 more hours at $15. Those 4 last hours are actually calculated at $22.50, which is 1.5 times their normal rate. So that's some of the stuff we're going to be working on in this chapter, is how do you calculate these payrolls. And remember that 40 hours is a very important break point. Okay, after that you're going to do some different calculations. Another thing that you might need to calculate differently is that if people are asked to come in on federal holidays, they might receive 2 times the rate. This will depend on the holiday. It will depend on whether it falls on a business day, Monday through Friday, or whether it falls on a Saturday. And then it also depends on how your state views it. So there's too many different regulations to cover whether it actually happens that way in Oregon or not. So I can't answer questions for your business, because it might be up to the business whether they're private. It might be a public service, in which case it's different. The state's different. So many variables, but I'm just going to give you this right here. I'm going to say on this holiday, in this place and time, at this business, in this state, they're going to pay 2 times the rate. All right? So our person here has worked 36 hours. In fact, they've worked 40 hours, because when we get down here, that's 40 hours of regular pay. And then that's another 4 hours of overtime pay. And then if they come to work for another 8 hours on this day, that's 2 times the rate because of the holiday. And so now they're actually making $30 an hour for those 8 hours they worked on that day. And we're going to have to add in that amount as well. Okay? So this is the task we're going to be working on as part of Chapter 12. Besides the paycheck side is also the hourly side, because there's a lot of different formats that you have to understand here and add them in accordingly. So remember, this 8 hours here actually needs to be divided into 4 regular hours and 4 overtime hours calculated at a different rate. So this is what we're going to be working on for Chapter 12 in calculating pay stubs.